I saw the new Spider-Man No Way Home trailer, as did I guess everybody on the planet, and I'm excited. I'm excited because I love the idea of the multiverse, whether it's Marvel, DC, sci-fi. The idea of branching possibilities and just a whole bunch of questions and multiple things coming into play. I like that. I like that concept a lot. But it's something odd that I have felt pretty much since Spider-Man Homecoming was I understood the point of Tom Holland's Spider-Man. I understood the appeal. The only thing was I was waiting for his origin story. I wanted to know what makes this Spider-Man Spider-Man. And having shared the, the realization that I've been watching this Spider-Man in what will be his upcoming sixth film, and there is no Spider Bite, no Uncle Ben, and honestly, no villain that actually originates as being specifically Peter Parker slash Spider-Man's antagonist. And as I started to share this opinion of mine, it the I didn't expect people to not understand my gripe with that. In fact, a lot of people said that they love the fact that this Spider-Man completely skipped over its origin story. Why do we need to see the origin story of Spider-Man done again? And the same example that everyone gives is Bruce Wayne and Batman. How many times in a movie do we have to see the Waynes get shot and die in an alley? Why do we have to keep seeing these origins that we already know about? The thing is, like good old Stan Lee said a long time ago, everybody's comic is their first comic. And as someone who reads comics all the time, it does get a little frustrating when you're watching a movie and you kind of want the movie to hurry up and get to the point and get past the origin story that me, as the initiated, already kind of understand. The problem with that notion is that you're telling someone, if you want to know more about this story that you're watching or reading, you gotta go elsewhere. That can be fun, but what if this was the only Spider-Man movie I watched? What if Spider-Man Far From Home was the only movie that I saw? And I know everybody's complaint is that why would you start off in the middle of the MCU? Well, that's the point. The MCU isn't a series. It's not a show. It's not even a comic book. These are a succession of films. Some of them have sequels, yes, but I don't know any other movie where I have to watch the 20 or so movies that came before it to understand it. And even so, within the MCU, there's nothing that helps you understand this version of Peter Parker other than his interactions with the rest of the MCU. My problem, I guess, comes from the fact that this Spider-Man was introduced as more of a Robin to the MCU than his own standalone superhero. We're in on the ride with him. We're experiencing it through his fresh eyes, kind of like Jubilee in the 90s with the X-Men comics. I understand that, but once we get to his own films, I assumed that it would start to take off with his own story. No, it's kind of the same thing with both Homecoming and Far From Home. You have a villain that seems to start to come around Peter Parker. They happen to cross paths because they're dealing with the bigger heroes of the MCU, which I understand it makes the MCU seem grander, but you're starting to take away from the importance of Spider-Man. Every movie has its own chance to tell a story. That's why the origin is done so many times. Let's use Bruce Wayne and Batman as an example. How many times have you seen on screen the Waynes get shot? Well, let's think about it. Batman 1989, Tim Burton. He introduces that movie, and we, in that film, see the Waynes going into the alley and someone shooting them. What was the point of it? Oh, to show the origins of Batman? Well, in this story, narratively, it's so that we can see that it was the Joker that killed his parents. So, yes, it was something that we would start to see all the time, but there's a far different reason for having it in the movie. In Batman Forever, we see it done again. Why? Because Batman Forever is dealing with the mental decline of Bruce Wayne and him dealing with his guilt. We see Batman Begins, and we see how that affects an 8-year-old boy up into adulthood, where it is the antithesis of him leaving the entire city and his entire life behind so that he can start on a path of becoming something different. In Joker 2019, you see the city start to erupt and go insane, and then as a casualty, we see the Waynes get shot. Yes, it's something that you see over and over again, but you're missing the reason why it's in the film. It's trying to introduce something. This person, whoever taken on this movie or studio, is trying to tell their story. Hell, Spider-Man 2002, when it came out, everybody was mad because within the origin, they took out what everyone thought was a crucial part of making Spider-Man Spider-Man, which was his rep shooters. But this movie said, well, what doesn't it make more sense to have if he got bit by a radioactive spider to give him organic webbing? Something that I'm sure will be touched on in Spider-Man No Way Home. But again, not talking about that in the MCU movies. Oh, Peter has web shooters. That's something that he invented, something that kind of got taken away from him because Tony Stark started to give him his suits and all this technology. So now, along with not having the origin, you've taken away a big part of Spider-Man's ingenuity. Like, that's a huge part of what makes him a great superhero, is that in a bind, if he's by himself, he can get himself out of it just because of his own intelligence. I understand that now that we're in a world full of intelligent people, that, yeah, maybe he's not the smart guy. But I don't think that's any reason to not have an origin story for this Spider-Man. Especially if we're going into a movie where he may have 5 or so villains that have nothing to do with him. Just versions of Spider-Man that we as people who are paying attention to the zeitgeist understand who Spider-Man is as a pop culture icon. But does that mean that we don't have to see how he got to the point that he got to? It's kind of been my problem with Tom Holland's Spider-Man. I think he's a great Peter Parker. I think Tom Holland is a great actor. But it's not even to the point where I need him to be Tobey Maguire, where he's struggling every 2 seconds. It's just, I would kind of like to see him on his own in this world. I would like to see what that means. And I feel like for him already getting a Sinister Six movie, it's kind of strange because he really hasn't had a villain of his own. I'm still excited for the movie. I mean, it's Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man. I think it's crazy that I'm getting a Sinister Six, no matter how it came about, in a movie. But I think moving forward, even though we, as comic book movie fans, understand certain origins, we're starting to take away from the storytelling that's happening in the film or project that we're watching. And it's kind of hard to judge something like that. Like, do you judge it on its merits alone, or do you judge it on the things that you remember? I don't want properties to skate by on my own nostalgia. I want to judge it for what it's presenting. I don't care if I know everything about it. What are you presenting to me? Does it make sense? And does it feel like it's handled with the care of somebody that knows about all of these universes or stories? I don't know. It was just something that was bugging me.